Welcome to Cinema Bites, your go-to for movie recaps in a flash. Big twists, epic moments, all in just minutes. Our story starts with a young boy named Stein. This boy had a somewhat strange dream. He wanted to become the greatest miner in the world. He loved exploration, building, and inventions that no one else dared to create. But every time he tried to enter the mine near them, an old man would appear and tell him, "No entry, these are the rules. Children are not allowed." So the boy waited until he grew up and became a man. But life was tough on him. He didn't become a miner. Instead, he ended up going house to house selling boring items, and he himself was bored with his life. Until one day, while eating alone, he remembered his old dream, and the spark returned. He decided to return to the mine, and this time, no one would stop him. So he went, and when he saw the old man again, he ignored him and went straight in. He started digging as if trying to make up for all the lost years. During the digging, he found two very strange cubes, one crystalline and the other called the Creation Cube. When placed together, they opened a magical portal to an entirely different world. Welcome to the upper world of Minecraft, a world of freedom and creativity where nothing is impossible. In the midst of this strange world, he met a pink sheep named Pink. He built 3 beautiful houses and started fulfilling his dream, building as he pleased. During his adventures, a wild wolf appeared and tried to eat him, but he tamed it with some meat and named it Dennis. From that moment, they became friends, building together and shaping the world with their hands, until all the animals lived with them in peace. Every day, they discovered something new, but life is never always perfect. Steen found a mysterious box inside a cave, and when he opened it, another portal appeared. This time, the portal led to the Nether, a dark and depressing world devoid of creativity and innovation, filled with darkness and evil creatures. The most dangerous of them were pig-like beings, servants of an evil witch named Malusha. This woman had been a victim of bullying since she was young. Even her father disowned her, calling her a disgrace. From that day, she hated everything and wanted to destroy the entire world. She was obsessed with the Creation Cube, wanting to use it to rule all the worlds. But Stein was smarter than her. He stole the magical orb from her and gave it to Dennis, telling him to take it back to Earth and hide it where no one could find it. Dennis executed the mission perfectly, and the world remained safe as long as the cube was hidden. Years passed, and a new character appeared in the story. Garrett Garrison, a young man with a style completely different from the gaming world. He created a game arena called Arcade. He had a strange talent for throwing trash with laser precision, earning him fame, money, and million-dollar contracts. But suddenly, everything fell apart. He was evicted from his house and went bankrupt. He decided to attend an auction, hoping to buy something cheap to sell and make a profit. One of the staff pointed out an old, strange item. Garrett said, "If it's cheap, I'll buy it." Indeed, he entered the auction, and after some bidding, he won the item for $900 in installments. He opened the box, but it was empty. He had been scammed. Frustrated, he closed the box, not noticing that the Creation Cube was clearly visible inside, but he was too blind to see it. At that moment, he heard someone complaining about poverty and told him, maybe it's time to stop buying treasures from shady auctions. Meanwhile, a girl named Natalie and her brother Henry moved to a new city after their mother's death. Natalie and Henry, after moving to the new city, met a woman named Dawn, who seemed kind-hearted. She welcomed them with a smile and warm words. The next morning, Natalie woke up early and made Henry a pizza breakfast so he could take it to school and break the ice with his classmates. She even gave him a bottle of cologne to make him feel loved and not alone. But Henry, still upset by the change and his mother's loss, reluctantly said, "No thanks," and went to school. Meanwhile, Garrett was cleaning his shop from some clutter, and suddenly, Henry walked in. The boy was in distress and offered him a slice of pizza in exchange for advice. Garrett, who calls himself the life game seller, joked, "I charge $50 an hour." But then they laughed and started talking seriously. He told him, "Friends are like puzzles. Sometimes all the pieces are there and sometimes you feel like you're missing a piece. You can't be a team by yourself. You need others to complete you." The words touched Henry and he went to school. There, he met the principal, who took his information and gave him an ID card. During their conversation, she surprised him by saying her marriage had been over for a long time, but they stayed together because they loved their dogs. Henry entered the classroom where the teacher, who had some personal issues, was joking and complaining about his life. A group project began, and Henry got confused and misplaced some pieces, causing the flying jacket model to explode. At that moment, Natalie was working nearby, and the crazy device crashed into her building. The principal insisted on meeting his guardian immediately. Henry panicked and called Garrett, asking if he could pretend to be his uncle. Garrett, hearing that Henry had $26 in cash, agreed to come right away. While trying to explain things to the principal, Henry noticed the strange cube in Garrett's shop and asked about it. Garrett casually said, I'm selling it for $95 and I don't even know what it does. While packing, an old instruction booklet fell out, warning in bold letters never to combine the crystal ball with the creation cube. It also said, don't even think about trying, even if you're broke and hoping for treasure. They said, let's try and see what happens. They went to an abandoned mine to see if there was any energy or anything. They thought they were joking, but the adventure waiting for them was insane. At that time, Natalie noticed that Henry was late and hadn't returned home. She called Dawn, who used a location tracking app to pinpoint his location in an old, abandoned mine. They rushed to save him and saw something terrifying. The strange cube was glowing and emitting a mysterious energy that attracted Henry. Without thinking, they all grabbed it and were pulled one by one into the magical portal. As they emerged from the portal, they were instantly transported to the upper world. Garrett was stunned by the view and proudly introduced himself, saying, I'm the legendary video game hero from 1989. Suddenly, they encountered the famous pink sheep, Pink, who stood staring at them in amazement. But they weren't alone. Villagers who saw the portal open decided to enter our world. A strange interaction began between the two worlds. Meanwhile, in the Nether, the creatures obsessed with gold were digging relentlessly, finding nothing. Melusha was in a hysterical state, threatening them. If you don't bring me treasure, I'll turn you all into roasted pigs. At the same moment, the magical cube started activating again, and Melusha was swept away like the madwoman imprisoned Steve because she knew he was the one who stole the ball. But instead of arguing, she let him go under one condition. If he wanted to save Dennis, his dog that she had locked up, he had to retrieve the ball from the upper world. In the upper world, Garrett was trying to act tough in front of the sheep, Banco, who kept giving him tasks to search for treasure. A lot of time passed with no progress. Suddenly, Dennis returned, and the legendary wolf appeared, rushing toward Garrett with a clear message or the beginning of a new war. The wolf howled loudly, startling Krika, who stepped back, and the doll fell silent, but not for long. Terrifying sounds grew louder as skeletal hunters, giant spiders, zombies, and creepers emerged from the darkness. The attack began, and everyone ran to save themselves, but Henry didn't freeze like the others. He quickly thought and started building walls and shields with blocks to protect the others. Meanwhile, Garrett tried to hide, but a creeper exploded next to him, causing him to scream and give away his position, leading the zombies to surround him. Pink was also kidnapped amidst the chaos, but at a dramatic moment, the fairy appeared to save Garrett, and the battle raged on until suddenly, Steve descended like a superhero, taking down all the monsters one by one with inhuman movements. Everyone stood in awe, unable to believe what they had witnessed. The sun rose, burning the zombies in its light. The Sword of Light survived, and Steve offered a deal. They could return to the land, but only if they took the ball and gave it to him. Unfortunately, there was no way back without the crystal cube. They had to find it, or an alternative method. Meanwhile, the villager who entered through the gate was hit by the manager's car as she was distracted, her mind preoccupied with lawsuits and compensations. She quickly tried to act normal and said, everyone wants to sue me these days, but you're a wise man. The villager, who had the wisdom of the elders and carried an iron pen, stood strong and honorable. Back in the lower world, Melusha was losing her mind as all her attempts failed. She decided to summon her strongest commander, Jankos, the greatest general, or pig, as she called him. She told him about 4 strangers who had the ball, calling them the Round Ones. Before sending him, she gave him a plant-based spell to protect him and his soldiers from turning into zombies or roasted piglets. She told him, the ball must return no matter what. In the upper world, the fairy continued its journey toward the legendary palace. Along the way, they discovered a magical place filled with tools, inventions, and artifacts. There, they found an ancient piece that allowed them to teleport anywhere it was thrown. Of course, Garrett couldn't resist and immediately threw it without asking, not knowing it was the last piece. Steve then taught them how to craft tools from the resources of this world. Garrett, in his excitement, created a strange-looking weapon that worked, while Henry combined pieces from the real world with items from Minecraft to make something truly useful with his intelligence. Later, Garrett pulled Steve aside and said, I read the note that came with the ball. What's this treasure it mentions? Steve looked at him and admitted, yes, there's a hidden gold treasure in the mines, but it's far from the palace and extremely dangerous to reach. Garrett, undeterred, stared into his eyes and said, no gold, no ball. They decided to venture into the mines. As they moved forward, Jankos appeared, addressing Steve politely but with a tone that suggested he could end him right then and there. Steve tried to de-escalate the situation, but Garrett, jealous and eager to play the hero, jumped at Jankos with his strange weapon. The attack failed miserably, causing chaos, and Steve was forced to retreat. Thus began the battle. The group split up, with Garrett and Henry taking a completely different path. They all agreed to meet at the Grand Palace to find a way to escape together. Steve distributed magical flying wings to everyone, but he and Garrett stayed behind for an intense chase. They flew between walls, dodging attacks and performing acrobatics as an army pursued them. They passed over a field of sleeping villagers, unaware of the madness above. Finally, they made a perfect landing, diving into a lake, exhausted but alive. Meanwhile, the manager was on a casual dinner date with the villager she had hit with her car. During the meal, she admitted she had just gone through a divorce and said her ex-husband lacked any personality. Back in the upper world, Steve began telling the story of Malosha. This evil woman once dreamed of becoming a world-class dancer. Her movements were elegant and beautiful, defying all expectations. The way, they discovered a magical place filled with tools, inventions, and artifacts. There, they found an ancient piece that allowed them to teleport anywhere it was thrown. Of course, Garrett couldn't resist and immediately threw it without asking, not knowing it was the last piece. Steve then taught them how to craft tools from the resources of this world. Garrett, in his excitement, created a strange-looking weapon that worked, while Henry combined pieces from the real world with items from Minecraft to make something truly useful with his intelligence. Later, Garrett pulled Steve aside and said, "I read the note that came with the ball. What's this treasure it mentions?" Steve looked at him and admitted, "Yes, there's a hidden gold treasure in the mines, but it's far from the palace and extremely dangerous to reach." Garrett, undeterred, stared into his eyes and said, "No gold, no ball." They decided to venture into the mines. As they moved forward, Jankos appeared, addressing Steve politely but with a tone that suggested he could end him right then and there. Steve tried to de-escalate the situation, but Garrett, jealous and eager to play the hero, jumped at Jankos with his strange weapon. The attack failed miserably, causing chaos, and Steve was forced to retreat. Thus began the battle. The group split up, with Garrett and Henry taking a completely different path. They all agreed to meet at the Grand Palace to find a way to escape together. Steve distributed magical flying wings to everyone, but he and Garrett stayed behind for an intense chase. They flew between walls, dodging attacks and performing acrobatics as an army pursued them. They passed over a field of sleeping villagers, unaware of the madness above. Finally, they made a perfect landing, diving into a lake, exhausted but alive. Meanwhile, the manager was on a casual dinner date with the villager she had hit with her car. During the meal, she admitted she had just gone through a divorce and said her ex-husband lacked any personality. Back in the upper world, Steve began telling the story of Malosha. This evil woman once dreamed of becoming a world-class dancer. Her movements were elegant and beautiful, defying all expectations. But one week, she was fired, shattering her dream. From that day, she decided to despise beauty and creativity. If she got the ball, she would destroy the upper world and everything innocent within it. But Steve was torn, as he needed the ball to save Dennis, who was still imprisoned by Malosha. Meanwhile, Malosha was boiling with rage. Jankos had failed, and her patience had run out. She unleashed her secret weapon, the Great Pig, a massive destructive beast programmed for chaos. It crushed Jankos instantly. With a voice that shook mountains, Malosha screamed, "Bring me the ball now!" Elsewhere, the group encountered something unexpected, the legendary wolf, Lemus. Dawn offered him a bone to gain his trust. Feeling their kindness, Lemus allowed them to approach. Knowing the wolf belonged to Steve, they decided to follow it, hoping it would lead them to their friend. Deep underground, Steve, Garrett, and Henry reached the treasure site. But Steve's experienced nose detected a foul smell. It was a warning of danger. The Great Pig had arrived. Steve shouted for them to run to a safe room. They hopped into mine carts, speeding like rockets. But when they needed more speed than ever, the cart stopped in front of a creeper farm. As if things couldn't get worse, the Great Pig burst in, shaking the ground with its roar. They were trapped with no escape. Steve and Garrett made a crazy decision. They activated all the creepers at once. The explosion was massive, shaking the earth. Amidst the smoke and debris, they managed to escape, physically safe but mentally drained. Tensions were high, and Steve lost his temper. He yelled at Garrett, "We lost the gold because of your greed." Garrett, equally angry, replied, "I need the gold. It's my only chance to escape poverty." Henry, still a child but wise, looked at him and said, "I'm your friend." That simple statement struck a chord in Garrett's heart, leaving them in a moment of emotional silence. A true friendship was born. From there, they began planning their assault on the palace. According to the map, the palace had 3 levels, the first guarded by well-trained and disciplined villagers, the second filled with dark sorcerers capable of creating real nightmares, and the final level housing the inner crystal, guarded by the Enderman, a creature so powerful that one look could end anyone. But before they could move, the villagers ambushed them, capturing the adults and dragging them into an underground fight club with no rules. Steve hid, watching from a distance as Garrett was thrown into the arena. To everyone's shock, His opponent was a baby zombie riding a bloody chicken. At that time, he managed to sneak into the third floor, the vault, the place where all the secrets are kept. The ground was dark and eerie, and standing in front of him was the Enderman himself. The atmosphere was heavy and the rap music filled the place where all the secrets were kept. There was no escape, but Henry drew his diamond sword without hesitation and leapt at him. The battle was insane. Blows, knives, and magic flying through the air. But in the end, Henry emerged as a true hero. As a reward, he took a magical artifact capable of teleporting him anywhere in the overworld, maybe even further. After escaping the castle, they were exhausted and threatened. But the important thing was that the end was near. Suddenly, Malosha appeared before them. She was following the scent of the magical orb. With a sly smile, she snatched the cube of anxiety and the Enderman crystal and disappeared into the darkness. It seemed like she had won. They thought about chasing her, but Jared looked ahead with a challenging gaze and said, "If we lose with honor." He raised his hand and shouted, "Let's go to the heavy metal," and caused a massive explosion to stop Malosha at the last moment. The drama shook everyone far away, and the lava scattered amidst the ruins. They were injured and battered, but still alive. After a while, Dennis found Steve and started to wake him up. Steve woke up with difficulty, and then Henry began to move too, in pain, but still standing on his feet. Amidst the destruction, they found their little shelter intact. It was something Dawn had quickly built as a refuge. They gathered with Natalia and began to think. The overworld was falling apart, darkness was spreading, and Malosha's power was consuming everything. At that moment, Jared saw an opportunity and said, "We won't let her win. Not after all this." They all decided to strike back. They started crafting new tools, stronger and smarter. Here, Riley came up with a brilliant plan. They gathered iron and upgraded it with speed and destruction units. Then they built a raging army of iron giants. Malosha saw them and laughed, saying, "The golems won't attack unless provoked." But a small pig jumped and struck the first blow. What followed was a world war. The golems went mad, and the battle ignited. Malosha unleashed her ultimate weapon, the Great Pig. But she didn't anticipate that the heroes had also built their own giant golem, made of a secret metal stronger than anything she'd ever seen. The two beasts clashed in a battle that shook the entire world. Amidst the chaos, Steve faced Malosha personally, wearing full diamond armor and wielding a legendary sword. But she didn't seem scared. Elsewhere on the battlefield, Henry was near the control orb, and Natalia was alone. Suddenly, the Great Pig broke away from the battle and charged at her with madness. That moment seemed like the end. But suddenly, a howl echoed from afar. Dawn stood atop a hill with a whole pack of wild wolves. Her voice shook the battlefield, and everyone turned to her. She shouted at the top of her lungs, "Anyone who dares to harm my friends will pay." Dawn had united the wolves in a strange and magical way. With a sharp whistle, she commanded them to attack. The wolves pounced on the Great Pig, engaging in a primal, savage fight reminiscent of the dinosaur era. Amidst the chaos, the Great Pig entered a frenzy and unleashed a deadly beam aimed at Henry. Henry fell, and the battlefield fell silent. Time seemed to stop. Suddenly, amidst the smoke and fire, Jared emerged from the rubble, rising like a phoenix from the ashes. He ran to Henry, lifted him off the ground, and dragged him to safety. Everyone left standing gathered their remaining strength, completely drained but still with one last breath for the fight. At this moment, the balance began to shift again, but everyone thought it was over for them, until the giant golem delivered a crushing blow to the beast. The magical orb returned to its rightful owners. After the orb was restored, it was time for the final confrontation. Steve stood before Malosha, who was now weak, cornered, and defeated. He looked her in the eyes and said, "You're finished. You've lost." But even in that moment, she tried to attack 3 more times with a hidden dagger. Steve blocked her every time. In the end, she had no choice but to retreat, living with the shame of defeat. The danger was over, and Steve bid farewell to the team. He looked at Henry and asked, "Would you like to live with us in the overworld and start a new life?" Henry smiled and said, "I'll return to my home." Steve respected his decision and reunited with Dennis. Suddenly, Dennis knelt before him, handed him the reins of leadership, and smiled calmly. He said, "I need a break, and you deserve this." Later, Jared told him, "You're a true friend and a brave warrior." He thanked Natalia and Dawn for their courage and bid them farewell one by one as they walked away from the portal. When everyone had left, Steve stood for a moment, looked around and suddenly decided to return to Earth. He returned to our world, and their lives completely changed. He received a huge promotion, and his shop became a trend. He became the king of work and play, and they all started designing new games inspired by their crazy adventure. Dawn became a cheerful adventurer, opening a self-defense school and becoming a community hero. Dennis repaired his pilot's jacket, now soaring through the skies, living his dream. Finally, the villager and the manager fell in love. On a magical night, he knelt on one knee, took her hand, and proposed. And that was our story today, heroes. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new adventures. Stay tuned.